First of all, at the outset, I would like to thank Isra and Supriti for inviting me into this webinar. This theme is extremely close to my heart, and I'm very eager to listen to other panelists, and of course, a great introduction by Supriti herself. Um, uh, as you said, I'm teaching at the Royal University for Women. If you see, I'm in the Gulf region, and I live in a country at this moment called Bahrain, and I see how empowered, how independent women are, unlike the popular perception. And the university that I work itself is an university dedicated to the cause of higher education for women. And I see bright young girls who are trying to make a career for themselves, or trying to educate themselves, and they you know um, every day when see them trying and trying to educate themselves, it's really fantastic to see that. What I feel about this whole theme of gender equality, of course, that as we know that we have a long way to go. When we think about this, but I see it from a behavioral angle. I'm a behavioral researcher myself, and I think the whole issue, I see it from the lens of behavior. Whatever we see, whether this is about gender equality, in terms of supporting gender equality, or it's about which takes us away from gender equality, I think it is behavioral. One very interesting thing about behavior, social behavior, any behavior that we exhibit, uh, is that behavior is not random. No behavior is random. How random it might appear to be, behavior is always, behavior. Every behavior has a reason behind it, and hence the underlying aspect which drives our behaviors is our attitudes and mindsets, the mindsets that we have. So, and those mindset in turn are shaped by the environment, the situation that we are in, right? So, in other words, uh, the behavior is shaped by attitudes and mindset, and attitude and mindset are shaped by the environmental situation that we're in. you know uh, so if we want to change the behaviors, we have to change the attitudes and the mindset first. And if we want to change the attitude and mindset first, we need to have a change in the environment itself, in the situation itself. Now, before let me tell you some of my, because today I'm speaking only from my experience, and that experience that I have had personally, and I experience that I have had with working, as much limited knowledge that I have in this area. My wife, is educated. She is a homemaker, and I'm very proud that she is a homemaker. But one of the most common things that I've encountered whenever I have met people, and irrespective of the gender, both men and women, but they ask me, "What does your wife do?" And I tell them, "Okay, she's a homemaker." And most of the times, the immediate remark is, "Oh, she's not working." This is the this is why I call this whole thing as behavioral and mindset issue. And I know, as much as I want to be polite to them, I politely tell them, "I'm sorry, she's working, probably without any career or expectations, or without any monetary expectations, without probably a promotion, without probably thinking for herself, but she's working." This is something. Similarly, when we take about, I look at, these days when we are in the midst of pandemic. I saw many of the jokes coming in. Men are cooking. No, men cooking. This becomes a joke. Why is this a joke? What is so wrong with men cooking? Men doing household chores, right? So there is where, I see these jokes coming in, and household chore somehow, has been always associated with women. And asked, why is this so? Why is this so? And the closest men come, and I know that I might be, ruffling few feathers when I say this. The closest most men come, and I not say all, is that they come to the say, "We are helping." Why is helping? Why it's not sharing? I always tell my son that we live in a house where we share this house, all three of us, and it's our equal responsibility to manage the household chores. It's not your mom's responsibility alone. It's all our responsibility. We share the work. We don't help. So I think this is all behavioral. This mindset. If you, I have encountered some really, something, sometimes it's very disgusting, the things that I read. A few days back I read something which was like a joke, a rape joke, somebody sharing, and educated people, by the way, educated people, they are not uneducated people, but sharing jokes on rape. And I see this, it's a huge ignorance that we are probably, or a kind of, the kind of behaviors that we are exhibiting. It shows the deep set mindset, the deep-seated mindset, and probably that has been shaped by the environment that we are in. So I think from the perspective of gender equality, I see that this shift that we want to see, I see it in three ways. One is, so how do we change the environment? I think the first is about women asserting themselves. The women of assertion, I think I think women are and of course have to be more at the forefront of ensuring this. There is so women assertion, women becoming more aware, about their basic human rights. Forget about other legal rights and of course social rights that they have, but basic human right as a human being. What are their rights? So I first see it as a woman assertion. Is as the second, I see women supporting other women. Like how do women supporting other women and third, the participation of men. I think and I continue to say this, that it's like the two wheels of any way. Yeah, they both have to move together. They both go hand in hand. So it's also the participation of women. So if we want to see the change in behaviors, we have to start it at the root of it. And I think we need to shift in attitudinal shift and the mindset shift. That's only possible when we shift. We see the shift in the situation or the environment, and the shift in the situation and the environment is categorized, according to me, about these three things: the women asserting themselves, women supporting women, and participation of men.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more on the points that you have mentioned, and we'll take it up as we go on. So my next question to you would be, Debashish, since you are already working with millennials and, the future generation, so it makes it all the more important to understand how our future is thinking about gender equality, what approaches they have, and what kind of ideas they are developing towards this whole issue, and how do they want to take it on. So if you can just elaborate on us that your experience in working with the millennials, how it has been, and what do you think about them? Since you have mentioned quite a lot in your book, so how is it, and what do you think? What is your idea on that?
Okay, I think millennials are definitely a cohort who are much more aware, much more, socially responsible than the other generations. As a cohort, they really, you can see a lot of change, kind of shift, because if you look at millennials, what I have experienced is, they have lived a different time, and hence they have been shaped by different environmental variables than the previous generation, which has caused the shift in their attitudes and mindset, and has it definitely changed their behavior. Now, as far as gender equality, of course, you cannot say that this generation, the whole generation, cannot be termed as perfect, but definitely there are some examples or certain stories that I want to tell you quickly, and that probably will help us to understand how millennials are thinking about it. Like one of the first stories that few months back that I did was on three, or they call themselves the Rebecca girls. These are three young women, young millennial women, called Richa, Bindia, and Kanika. They, the story, they've started an entrepreneurship venture together, which is basically called as Rebecca Girls. The story is very interesting. All three were married. All three were married to extremely well-to-do families. Their husbands, their husbands were businessmen, and they are very well-to-do. And at a point of time when they got married, and of course, they decided, all these three girls got together and decided that they want to do something on their own. They're all educated, or more, Richa is an MBA, and other two are also highly educated. They wanted to do something on, and they wanted to, start a venture for them. this is one example where you can see, as I told, I said, we want the participation of men. See how the participation of, it's a both example of women asserting themselves and the participation of men. Their husbands now, of course, as much as they wanted to do, their husbands were supportive in doing this. And, these three girls, when they started that, they had no money, to start with. But, as much as they, their husbands wanted to help, they didn't want to take that money, right? Because they wanted to do something independently, and they did. And today they are a successful, company. They found a successful company. They run it themselves. So you see how this, their husbands are millennials. They are millennials themselves. So we see both the examples, where women asserting themselves as well as the participation of men in this. So the second story, one of the stories that I did was about a millennial girl, Devlina, that who's working with some of her other friends, all of the millennials. They basically do their jobs, their regular jobs that they do. But beyond that, as they when they were on their way to from when they get down from the metro station, they go down to the work. They live in one of the bustling metros. Let me not name the city because but bustling metros. So they get down to they encounter some kids on the pavement, street kids, and they decided to work for them. But when they go further, they understand that these kids were of women who had been forced into prostitution. And these kids live under horrible conditions as much as these women are. And they decide themselves that without having an organization, without having any support, they decide themselves that they want to do something for these women and these kids. And on their own, they have started doing that. They have started conducting classes for these kids. They have started conducting certain, health campaigns, because health is a major issue with these women, health awareness or health support, for these women. And of course, they faced a lot of opposition because there is a lot of, agencies which provide, or individuals whose vested interests are there not to change the their conditions. So they faced opposition, but they still are holding up and are doing and trying to probably register the society or something doing that. This is something which I think moves me. These are the things about millennials which move me. Or take another story of a girl called Sandhya. She comes from a business family, well-to-do family. She did her MBA, and she was my student at one point of time. She joined a company, was doing very well as an HR, and but then she decided to pursue her dream, and she gave up a cushy job, a good salary, and her family is completely supportive of that. By the way, she also overcome a personal crisis and depression, and formed a successful patisserie, which is like a major bakery that she has in Bangalore. So there are. This is where you see the family support, and again we see in terms of women supporting women. Like I did another story about a lady called Rupashi, Rupashi Bhattacharya, who runs her own boutique called Grace Boutique, very successful and extremely skilled. And she decides to support these young millennial women, young millennial girls who come from underprivileged families, wanting to do something, and for free she teaches them the skills and helps them to get into jobs, or maybe start doing work themselves and make an income. And many of these, their lives have been transformed. So and another last example that I want to share is of a lady called Juhi Datta and her wonderful team of women who work in the city of Baroda. They started their work with street children and these women laborers, these construction laborers who work at various sites, and how they have you see have been supporting these women. So in other words, what I want to say is that, of course, there are heartwarming stories of how millennials are doing, trying to change this whole equation. But again, I see all these examples that I shared from the perspective of women asserting themselves, women supporting women, and participation of men, which I see much more in the millennial generation. Having said this, it is not that we don't need to work in this area. This is perfect. It's not like that, but definitely much more than what we have seen before. But again, there is a difference between when we see urban and rural. This is not same again in urban and rural areas. Rural areas probably it's not as much as it is in some certain more urban centers. I am reminded when we talk about this gender equality, I'm reminded of a story which we all have heard about, this rabbit and tortoise story. Okay, so that the first part of the story, they decide to have a race, and obviously rabbit takes it, he slacks down, and the tortoise wins the race. That's only first half of the story. What happens later on is that rabbit does a little bit of thinking and thinks that okay, if I had not slept on the way and I've not slacked down, there was no way that tortoise could have defeated me in this race. So next time he challenges the tortoise again, and this time he makes sure that he doesn't stop before the finishing line. So he goes and runs and he goes beyond the finishing line, wins the race by miles. So this time, obviously, the second race is won by the rabbit. Third, now the tortoise does some, thinking, and he comes up with a plan, and he goes to the rabbit and he says, I want to challenge you for another race. Rabbit says, no problem. I'm not going to sleep anywhere. So you can have any race. But he says, I have a condition. He said, okay, any condition is acceptable. He said, you must listen. No, any condition is acceptable. I'm ready for the race. Okay. So they go for the race, the third race. And now when, rabbit runs, at full speed, but then he comes up, to the bank of a river. So the tortoise had selected the racetrack where there is a river in between, and rabbit doesn't know how to swim. So he thinks, he sits hours, at the bank of a river, because the river is very wide and he can't jump over that. Also, he has to go through it. He can't swim. So he just sits there and thinks, how will he cross this river? And by the time tortoise comes trudging along and looks at the rabbit, gives one look to the rabbit, gets into the water, swims and wins the race. Third race is again won by rabbit. Now both of them do some thinking, and they understand that this is going to be one way affair. Either rabbit is going to win the race, either tortoise is going to win the race if there is a water body in between. So both of them can never win. And this time they decide to run the race together. So first half of the race, rabbit carries the tortoise on its back till they come up to the river. When they come up to the river, they change. Tortoise carries the rabbit on its back, swims across the river, and crosses the river, and they both cross the finishing line again. So when we talk of gender equality, it is like that. Men and women are like rabbit and tortoise. There is no use of competing. The idea is to how do we support each other and how do we move together. And in terms of, I think, when we look at aspect of changing it at home, I think the very basic organization is home. And when we talk about, of course, change in the larger macro environment, as you rightly said, is about education, is about awareness, is about many things which we talk about. And of course, that will cause a mindset, attitudinal shift, and it causes a shift in the behavior. But most basic organization is home. And if we change things at home, I think every home changes, the whole environment changes by itself. Like we watch movies like, recent movies, some of the movies that I think, like one of the movie of, Bollywood movie, I don't know, maybe international audience may not be, but it's about, where a husband slaps his wife in anger. And, it's called Thappad, by Taapsee Pannu. And then everybody seems to, see that the wife is making a big fuss about it, when she gets angry and she wants to move out of the house. And husband is not understanding that. He says, well, okay, maybe in anger, I just slapped you. What's the big deal about it? And everybody around also looks at it from that particular angle. What's the big deal about it? And that's the problem. That's where the problem is. So we see movies like, Gunjan Saxena, or we see movies like Shakuntala Devi, and we see that they're breaking stereotypes there, so everything starts at home. When we create an environment where both boys and girls have equal rights, equal privileges, equal freedom, and also that we ensure that especially the boys, when they're growing up, they participate in the household work. They share the household work. They participate in everything that happens in the house. And I think from that perspective, when we look at, and it's also the relation, how both parents are treating each other. And when these kids, they see that their parents treat each other as equals, they share, they also encourage them to do that, it automatically they grow up with that kind of mindset. So if we have to change, we have to change our home first before we try to change the world. Because when we change our homes, it automatically has a ripple effect on the entire environment. We do that, it automatically kind of causes the shift. That's what I want to say.